Hey everybody, happy Friday. Welcome to Banfield. We're live tonight. I'm Brian Entin, in for Ashleigh. She has the night off. That controversial gag order in the quadruple murder case against Bryan Kohberger has been lifted for barely a day now, and already, it's only been a day, already officials who were silenced for 2.5 years are finally starting to talk. And tonight I will be joined live by Gary Jenkins. He is the former Pullman, Washington police chief. He is now the chief of police at Washington State University. Now, Washington State, of course, as you know, is where Bryan Kohberger was a PhD candidate in criminology. Jenkins was the top cop in Pullman when Kohberger applied to be an intern with that department. He didn't make the cut. He wanted to be an intern. He actually had an interview, didn't make the cut because of what Jenkins says was his demeanor. And now he can explain to us what he actually thought of Kohberger, what happened in that interview. We're going to talk about all of that and a lot more. That's in just a couple of minutes. Also tonight, what middle-aged parent hasn't asked their millennial kids for a little tech support? A frozen app here or there, an upload there. The prosecutors in Colorado say a dentist on trial for allegedly poisoning his wife asked a little too much of their tech-savvy 20-year-old daughter, specifically to make a deepfake video, of her murdered mom, asking for the poisons that killed her. How sick is that? That wasn't the only bombshell that dropped in court this week. I'll have it all later coming up in the show. And then a curious new wrinkle in the deaths of Robin Kay and Thomas DeLuca, the LA music power biz couple who were both found dead in their home this week. Remember, she is the big executive from American Idol. Well, a suspect is now in jail tonight, charged with the couple's murders, which apparently happened 4 days before the bodies were found. Get this, though. We're now learning police were actually at that house the very day of the killings, responding to a burglary call. And then the police left without stopping, without catching the burglar, without realizing that there were 2 dead people inside the house. Why? Why not? Why did all of that happen? What were the police up to? We're going to pick all of it apart. We've got the timeline. We've got new details. We've got new video of the suspect. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. But we start tonight, of course, in Idaho, 5 days before Bryan Kohberger is sentenced for a heinous quadruple murder, and 1 day after the gag order in that case was lifted. You heard it here first last night. There was frustration from one victim's father that gag or no gag, hundreds of court filings packed with vital information are still sealed. The gag order was lifted, but the docs are still sealed probably for months. Steve Gonzalez, father of Kaylee Gonzalez, wants all of the documents released now so that he and his family and the other victims know exactly how to write their victim impact statements before next Wednesday. Here's what Steve told Ashleigh last night.
I know her sisters want to do a victim statement and address the exacts, some of the things that happened to her. And they basically wouldn't share any information with us on, what happened to her. So I'm pretty used to how ridiculous, not just a gag order, but sealing something that has nothing to do with the victim's rights. It's all about, I hate to say it, but it is a lot to do with the media and people being put on cameras and not knowing what to say, or things coming out that they didn't mean to say, or just didn't have a good explanation of what was going on. So they wrap this seal thing around trying to pretend like they're, trying to protect people.
So we've now seen the guidance that victims' families have gotten for the statements they're invited to make. Immediate family members are being told by the court to, quote, I want to read you this, express to the court how the defendant's conduct has affected you physically, financially, mentally, and or emotionally. Victim impact statements provide the court with information describing the characteristics of the victim, Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, and all the and the emotional toll of the crimes on you and your family. Now, Steve Gonzalez told us the families are also being told to address their comments to the bench and to not address them to the killer, a restriction that he says benefits nobody but Bryan Kohberger. I'm joined now by Chief Gary Jenkins of the Washington State University Police Department. Jenkins is a former chief of the Pullman, Washington Police Department who interviewed Bryan Kohberger when Kohberger applied to be an intern there. Later, Chief Jenkins helped police in Moscow, Idaho get a warrant to search Kohberger's campus, apartment, and office. And Chief, it's very nice to have you tonight. We really appreciate you joining us very much. I want to start with you actually interviewed Bryan Kohberger. He applied to be an intern with your department while he was getting his PhD in criminology in Pullman. What was your take on him when he came into your office?
Well, actually, all my interviews were done over Zoom. I believe Kohberger was still in Pennsylvania at the time, but he was going to be making his way out to Pullman for his PhD program. One thing that I was looking for in particular was someone who can develop a sense of trust and rapport with my staff. That's a very important quality in order to be a researcher embedded in a police department because it's very tough to make inroads into law enforcement when you're considered an outsider, particularly from academia. And he was not particularly personable. He didn't speak in a fluid or conversational manner. And so I just felt like he would not be able to establish that trust and rapport needed to be an effective researcher in the police department.
Did you know right away that he wasn't going to be a good fit?
No, I mean, I interviewed each candidate. I interviewed four for about half an hour each. And it was, a little bit of time that I realized that just his demeanor and his way of conversing, I just didn't feel he'd be a good fit at the end of the interview.
So tell me, Chief, how it went down. Basically, you were called, this was months later, to Moscow, which is about 30 minutes away or so, 20 minutes away, because they wanted to tell you that they had identified a suspect in the murders. What happened when you got to the police station in Moscow, and what was your reaction when you found out that it was Bryan Kohberger?
Well, I thought it was going to be another law enforcement briefing. They had held a couple for local law enforcement. But when I met Chief Fry in the lobby, I was the only one there that met him, and he walked me up to a room. And when he walked me into the room, it was full of their investigative team. And I knew right away that there was something significant happening and that it was likely to do with Washington State University. And so they told me that they had developed a suspect and they had connected him by DNA at the crime scene. And then they told me his name was Bryan Kohberger. It took me a minute. The name sounded familiar. It's not a common name. And I recalled that I had interviewed him for that intern position when I previously worked at Pullman Police Department. So I let them know that. I told them I had his resume. I had a cover letter that I could share with them. And so they asked me to keep that information to myself for the moment and not even let my own department know that he had been identified. And so I went back to my department and sent them that information.
So I'm just curious, because you interact with a lot of people as police chief. I'm sure you interview a lot of people. When they said the name to you, how long did it take for it to sort of click like, oh my gosh, this is the guy I interviewed over Zoom for that position?
Well, I recognized the name. I just immediately, I didn't remember from where, but it was probably within 30 seconds. Then I remembered where it was. And I do have to say the hair on the back of my neck stood up knowing that I had interviewed him. Had I selected him, he would have been embedded with the Pullman Police Department. But to know that here he was, the prime suspect in this quadruple homicide was chilling.
Yeah, thankfully you didn't select him, Chief, because just imagine if you had, and knowing that someone, who's now admitted to this awful chain of murders, would have actually worked in the police department is kind of hard to even wrap your mind around, I'm sure.
Right, yeah, one of the best decisions I've ever made, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So we know that they were all looking for that Hyundai Elantra police all over the state and really the whole region. Was it ever spotted? Did your officers ever spot the car in Pullman?
Yeah, we received a BOLO alert from Moscow Police Department with other local law enforcement agencies before about the vehicle before it was released to the general public, and it was described as a white Elantra between the years of 2011 and 2013. And so after that was received, I sent it out to my staff, and within 16 hours, one of our officers located a close match through looking through our parking records on campus. And then later, the next shift, another officer actually found the vehicle parked at the graduate student housing where Bryan Kohberger lived. However, the vehicle was a 2015, so it did not meet the criteria included in the BOLO sent to us. So that tip was never forwarded to the tip line because it did not meet the criteria.
Interesting. What about, I've been to his apartment there, the graduate housing that you talk about. I've obviously only been on the outside. But when they did the search warrant, were you there? Did you get a chance to see inside the apartment at all?
So I wasn't there personally. My assistant chief oversaw that operation. Idaho State Police came over and our staff assisted them. But I did hear back that the apartment was sparsely decorated. There was minimal clothes. There wasn't even a shower curtain there. It appeared as if the person who had lived there, Bryan Kohberger, was not planning to come back.
And just lastly, Chief, I mean, for people who don't know, Pullman is right next to Moscow. I mean, people go back and forth for jobs and shopping, and it's kind of really one community in many ways. How are you doing? How's the community doing? I mean, obviously, a lot of people were expecting a trial. All of us were pretty much. And then this, this plea deal came through. What was your reaction to that, and sort of how's the community doing?
Well, the impact has been significant, as you can imagine. This was just a horrific event. Our communities are very tight-knit. We're somewhat geographically isolated, so we really have to depend on each other a lot. And so it was a significant impact on both communities and particularly both campuses, the University of Idaho and Washington State University, especially on Washington State University after Bryan Kohberger was identified and knowing that he had been living amongst other students and attending classes and actually teaching on the WSU campus. So it's been really tough. There's been a lot of support amongst all the faculty and staff and between the two communities. And so I think one of the things that I hope will come out of this as the positive is that how resilient the communities are and how much they have supported each other.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Police Chief Gary Jenkins, we appreciate you coming on with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Okay, so what happens to Bryan Kohberger 5 days from now won't be a surprise to anybody. For sparing the state the trouble of a months-long trial, the state will spare Kohberger's life. Instead of death by firing squad, he will die some other way later in prison. Now, the only question is what the victims' families will say before the sentence is handed down and how they'll actually say it. We've seen things go down in very dramatic ways before in other trials. I mean, you can imagine emotions run high. This is the family's final chance to actually express how they feel. Bryan Kohberger will be sitting right there. What will it actually look like on Wednesday? Will any of it even faze Bryan Kohberger? He's been stone cold through the whole thing. Is he gonna show any emotion? I'm joined now by defense attorney and former prosecutor Mark Eiglarsh and Chris Mahandi, clinical, police, and forensic psychologist. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Mark, I'll start with you. I want to go back for a second to the plea deal because I haven't heard your take on it yet. Are you surprised this is where we ended up? And do you think this was the plan all along, Mark, that they were going to do a plea at the end and they were just sort of dragging things out?
Not a surprise at all. I mean, there is this typical playbook. I've been there numerous times. I had a death case not too long ago. It starts with entering a not guilty plea, which doesn't mean your client's innocent. It just means, you got to prove it. Then they get the evidence. They look at the evidence. They see if it's sufficient or not. Will the state be able to prove the case against them? Then they file motions to suppress the evidence. Let's take as much as away that we can and then see what's left. And when they realize, goodness gracious, we're going to lose this trial, that's when it becomes extremely clear that there's only two options. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, or you'll be on death row. Which would you like? And he, at least, the psychopath that he is smart enough to know that he would have lost that trial and possibly gotten death, and so he opted for option number 2. It's that straightforward.
Is there any chance, Mark, that he could back out of the plea? Or, I mean, this is a very smart guy, you know, getting his PhD in criminology. He hasn't missed one hearing. There's been hearings on Zoom that he doesn't have to be at, that he attends. I mean, he's dialed in on all of it. Is there any chance that he could back out of the plea, or that he could be playing the long game and later say, I didn't have a good lawyer, ineffective counsel, and I actually do want an appeal?
Okay, so as it relates to him backing out of the plea, most likely no, because the judge did a fairly sufficient, thorough plea colloquy, making sure that he's voluntarily, intelligently, knowingly giving up all of his rights. So now it's just time for sentencing. So I do not believe he's going to be able to back out legally. But the second part, I'm glad you brought that up. Even though he's saying, I'm giving up all my appellate rights, the truth of the matter is he's smart enough to know about a 2019 Supreme Court case called Idaho versus Garza, where the court ruled 6-3 that a defendant, even who waives their right, can file an appeal, and the attorney who doesn't file it on their behalf is rendering ineffective assistance of counsel, meaning they're not doing their job. So without question, he still has the legal ability to file a motion and say, yeah, my attorneys didn't do what they were supposed to. This doesn't guarantee you won't hear more legal challenges from him.
Yeah, and I think he knows that. I really do. I think he's smart enough to know that. Dr. Mohandy, what do you think his demeanor is going to be like at sentencing? He's been, I mean, I've been to every hearing, totally stone cold, not 1 ounce of emotion. Is there any chance that when the victims' families get up there, and I know some of them are, despite what the rules say, I believe some of them are going to address Bryan Kohberger, is there any chance he'll crack then?
Well, I think Mark used the right word a few moments ago, psychopath. That's a person that doesn't have, you know, any true empathy. So any emotions that we see will be performative. I don't think you're going to see it, though. This is a guy that's managed to detach himself from humanity to in cold blood, kill 4 people, 4 innocent people in the manner that has been described, you know, across time, that the crime scene, you know, speaks to. So I don't think we're going to see any genuine emotion from him whatsoever. I think he's going to be flat. I think he's going to be calm. And if there is any emotion, it will be performative.
And I mean, you understand the way these guys think, Dr. Mohandy. If you're a family member going into this and you don't want to give him the glory, and you don't, I mean, it's almost like you're feeding his ego in a sick way, because some people think he sort of enjoys this. I mean, how do you handle this as a family member without sort of like feeding into what he wants?
I think that they need to speak their truth no matter what. I think they need to authentically go in, say, and feel what they need to feel, express themselves. And I think that it needs to not matter one bit how he might take it. It needs to be about what they need to do and what they want to do.
Mark, if you're his lawyer, is there any benefit in telling him to speak at the sentencing at this? When he hasn't spoken yet, besides yes, no, basic answers. Would you be encouraging him to speak?
I've been there. I had one last year where my client was definitely going to get life. We finally got them to waive the death penalty. And at that point, who cares? You tell them, you know, this is your day, whatever you want to do, it really doesn't matter. And all these people, by the way, I want to address, all these people saying, we should know why he did it. The truth of the matter is you can't believe anything that flows from his lips, number one. But the only thing that he would be able to say that would resonate is, I'm a psychopath. Somehow I enjoyed killing people. That's it. How will that bring anybody any closure, make anybody feel any better? You know, those certain things are just better left unsaid, and let's move on.
Yeah, it's a good point. Why should we even believe anything he says? Mark Eiglarsh, Dr. Chris Mahandi, appreciate you both for coming on with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up right after this, for the first time on NewsNation, we have police images. These are new images we just got in of the murder suspect accused of shooting to death the longtime American Idol music supervisor and her husband. Police also are filling in the blanks on how long the victims were dead before their bodies were discovered, and were LAPD officers at the crime scene at the exact same time as the killer. The timelines, they seem to line up. There's new information, there's new images, all of it's next. New and disturbing information tonight that adds to the mystery surrounding the murders of Robin Kay and her husband, Thomas DeLuca. Now, you may not recognize their names, but you're going to know their work. Kay oversaw the music production on American Idol, and DeLuca was a rock guitarist and recording artist. Now, both were found shot to death in their LA area home on Monday when police did a welfare check. But the coroner says they were murdered 4 days earlier, all the way back on July 10th. And that's not unheard of. We know that bodies can go undiscovered for days, even weeks sometimes, especially when people die at home. But according to just released court documents, LA police were at this couple's home responding to a burglary call July 10th, which is the very day and maybe even the very time that Kay and DeLuca were apparently killed by an intruder. Now officers, they never entered the property that day. They never saw anything amiss, they say. And now they do have a suspect in custody charged with 2 counts of murder as well as burglary. I want to talk about all of this with Lauren Conlin. She's a pop culture and true crime podcaster. Her weekly show is called The Outlier Podcast. Lauren, thank you for being with us. What do you make of this timeline? Is it possible they were actually dead for 4 days and the cops showed up to the house 4 days earlier and they were already dead inside?
Brian, this is so tragic because there are reports where the LAPD said that they showed up pretty much about 15 minutes or maybe 30 minutes before Robin Kay and Thomas DeLuca arrived at their home. And actually 2 neighbors called 911 because they saw somebody jump this 8-foot-high wall that they have. And by the way, this house that they own was said to be one of the most secure houses on the block with surveillance cameras. So yeah, I mean, what happened was they arrived home, essentially. They ran into the perpetrator and they had some kind of confrontation, and unfortunately he shot them. So this is completely terrifying in so many ways and just so preventable.
We've got some new video, Lauren, of this suspect that they arrested. What do we know about him? Was there any connection to the couple, or was it just like totally random?
There was no connection known to the couple. His name is Raymond Budarian. He's 22 years old. I mean, this is so frustrating, and I don't want to get political, but I mean, Karen Bass is LA here. He was arrested in June of 2024, previously charged with battery and exhibiting a deadly weapon, but those charges were actually dismissed for reasons unknown. But court documents show that 3 months before they were dismissed, Budarian was deemed mentally incompetent. Now, I mean, I don't know about you, Brian, but if I'm, going to burglarize a house, I probably wouldn't burglarize a house with surveillance cameras all around it. So, something is very, very wrong with this guy. And I think that, more is going to come out as this case unfolds. I mean, it's so tragic for the family. They pushed back his arraignment to August 20th. So I don't know if we'll get too much before then, but police were able to identify him by the cameras and by using facial recognition. And when they searched his home, they did find a gun, gun hasn't been tested yet, so we don't necessarily know if it's the murder weapon. However, it's looking like that. And Brian, what's also really concerning is that a security company in Beverly Hills actually spoke out and said that Robin K. called them earlier this year because she was worried. She was worried about someone in her neighborhood, someone in her home, and she didn't end up hiring them. But I mean, you got to wonder what was going on here. And other neighbors had told police that, this neighborhood, although it was safe, there had been reports of prior theft and burglaries.
It's interesting you say that about his mental state, because the first thing I thought is if a burglar shows up to a house to burglarize the house, someone's home, you don't normally hear about that person then shooting the people in the head. He apparently shot them both in the head. Like, it doesn't really add up.
No, it doesn't at all. I mean, he has problems, but I don't necessarily want to go, the insanity route just yet, right? We don't know enough about this, but it's like we deserve to know. I'm saying we as the public, of course, the family deserves to know. They deserve to know what happened to his prior charges in 2024, why they were dismissed, because these are not small charges. These are serious. I mean, very serious assault. It's mind-blowing to me that this guy was on the street. And again, the family deserves answers. The people, the residents of Los Angeles deserve answers. I'm so heartbroken for Robin K. and Thomas DeLuca's family. Truly, I really hope they get justice.
Yeah, that is pretty enraging. I didn't know about that with the previous charges. Well, Lauren Conlon, we appreciate you for breaking us down. I'm a big fan, by the way. I watched your Twitter videos every day during Diddy. I just had to put that out there. You really rocked it out there. You were right outside the courthouse every day, so I'm a fan.
Thank you so much, Brian, and I'm a fan of you as well. I love your reporting. Thank you.
All right, have a good weekend. Be sure to listen every week to Lauren as she hosts the Outliers podcast. You can find it everywhere that you get your podcasts. All right, coming up, what is worse than allegedly murdering your wife, who's also the mother of your 6 kids? Allegedly asking one of the kids to help you get away with it. The Colorado dentist on trial in his wife's slow-motion poisoning allegedly claimed that she was suicidal, and you will not believe how prosecutors are saying he tried to prove it. We'll have the details right after the break. So we have been following the murder trial of a former Colorado dentist named James Craig, who in 2023 allegedly murdered Angela Craig, his wife, and the mother of his 6 kids. Prosecutors say Craig poisoned Angela's protein shakes, with arsenic, cyanide, and a chemical found in eye drops. And when none of that proved fatal, he allegedly forced her to swallow a cyanide capsule as she lay half dead in the hospital. Police say Craig tried to convince people Angela was suicidal, and we're now learning just how far he allegedly went to prove it. The Craig's second oldest daughter, who's now 20 and whose name is not being released, took the stand this week and said her father asked her to make a deep fake video of her mother to make it look like her mom was asking for the very poisons that killed her. The daughter testified that James Craig gave her detailed instructions for buying a cheap laptop with a prepaid debit card and finding the video on the dark web. She did not comply. The woman's older sister testified as well, saying their father told her that he didn't want an autopsy done because he didn't want investigators to, quote, satisfy their curiosities. Very strange and disturbing. Joining me now is defense attorney Eric Faddis, who has been in court all week and heard all of this testimony firsthand. Eric, thank you for joining us tonight. First of all, can you tell us more about this deep fake that the daughter was speaking about, and what was her reaction when she testified?
Yeah, Brent. So apparently, according to the prosecution, James Craig sent a letter to his daughter directing her to create this deepfake to sort of show how the wife was suicidal to support his defense after he had been arrested. He did this from jail. And so the daughters, multiple daughters, got on the stand and testified about that. Also about the fact, like you mentioned, that James Craig requested that an autopsy not be done, which which of course is suspicious. All of these factors are sort of piling up against James Craig throughout this trial.
So, yeah, so the oldest daughter testified that he said he didn't want the autopsy to satisfy their curiosities, whatever that means. But they did, in fact, do an autopsy. What did the autopsy show?
So the autopsy, I think, Brian, is damning. So it shows that Angela Craig died of of cyanide poisoning, but also that she had arsenic in her system, as well as a chemical that is found in eye drops. And on top of that, today, a detective got on the stand and showed how there was an Amazon purchase for arsenic around the time that Angela Craig would have ingested that unknowingly. And it was from an Amazon account that is linked to an email address for James Craig, a credit card for James Craig, and an address for James Craig.
Oh, this is just awful. In this picture of her, it looked like in a hospital bed. The details are terrible. I mean, what could the defense be, Eric? I mean, all of the evidence seems so damning. What has his defense said?
So far, they haven't come right out and said it. They've sort of hinted at it, kind of insinuated that maybe Angela Craig was suicidal at the time. I've heard reports that they might try to introduce evidence of some alleged prior opioid overdose. Angela Craig was struggling with some issues at times, as every human being does. And so I think that's the direction the defense is going to go. They're going to try to tie it together during their closing argument, but will the jury buy it? That question is still open.
And so there was also, I mean, this guy was obviously a dentist. There was another dentist, apparently, was it from the same office, who testified. What did she have to say?
Yeah, so that was Dr. Ryan Redford. He testified today, and there were some dramatic moments. So he went to the hospital where Angela Craig was. On the way, he got a call from the office manager saying that there was a package of cyanide at the office. And then Angela Craig passes away. He gets a call from James Craig after that, where he challenges James Craig, and he says, hey, what in the world do you need arsenic for? And James Craig first says that package wasn't arsenic, it was a ring for Angela. Redford says, no, we know it's arsenic. And then James Craig says, what have you done? What have you done to Dr. Redford? Because he knew Dr. Redford had relayed that information to nurses. Lastly, the next day, James Craig texts Dr. Redford begging him not to go to the police and to tell employees also not to go to the police.
Wow, this is twisted, Eric. I mean, this is going to be an interesting one for us to follow. Eric Faddis, really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good weekend.
I'll be with you.
Okay, still to come, sitcom star gunned down by a crazed fan on her own doorstep. He said a U2 song made him do it. And wait till you see what happened when they played that song at his murder trial. It is our True Crime Rewind on a Friday night. That's next. So tonight's True Crime Rewind is every celebrity's worst fear come true. On July 18th, 1989, 36 years ago today, Rebecca Schaeffer was gunned down by a stalker on her own doorstep in West Hollywood. Now, if you were old enough to watch TV back then, you'll remember that Schaeffer, as the 21-year-old co-star of the sitcom My Sister Sam. Now, what few people knew at the time was that Schaeffer had been tormented for 3 long years by a fan named Robert John Bardo. Twice Bardo visited the studio where Schaeffer filmed her show, and twice security sent him away. So then he paid a private investigator $250 to find Schaeffer's home address, which the PI obtained with a phone call to the DMV using only the actor's name. Bardo then acquired a handgun with the help of his brother and traveled from his home in Tucson, Arizona, to Schaeffer's apartment in West Hollywood. He dropped by twice that day. The first time he showed his idol an autograph she'd sent him in response to a fan letter, and after a short conversation, she sent him away and asked him that he should not come back. But after breakfast at a nearby diner, Bardo rang Schaeffer's doorbell yet again. And this time, when she answered the door, he pulled out his gun, and shot her point blank in the chest. She died soon after at a hospital. Now, Bardo was arrested back in Tucson. The very next day they got him, he was wandering through traffic, police said. He confessed to killing Schaefer, but at his trial in 1991, his lawyers claimed that he was mentally ill. And the prosecutor, though, did not buy it. Get this. Her name was Marcia Clark. And this was very likely the biggest case of her career, to be eclipsed, of course, 4 years later when she prosecuted O.J. Simpson. Clark argued that Robert Bardo's behavior did not point to mental illness.
Well, I don't take issue with the stance that this defendant was not a normal 13-year-old, nor with the notion that he was not a normal 19-year-old. A normal person doesn't stalk and murder a celebrity he's never met. Well, if that's so, Your Honor, as a practical matter, then where is the evidence of delusion? That the defendant deluded himself into believing that maybe someday Rebecca might be his friend? Well, then haven't we all been guilty of being delusional at some point in our lives? Have we not all held some unrealistic hope or dream? This just shows that the defendant had high hopes, albeit perhaps unrealistic. I'm not even sure that I can say that. Because if all he dreamed or hoped of was that she would write back to him someday, is that so unrealistic? She did once. So we might conclude that the defendant was a dreamer. But as the doctor admitted, he testified in the Hinckley case. Having hopes and dreams does not mean one has a serious mental disorder.
So fascinating. Bardo claimed that a U2 song called Exit inspired him to kill, and at his trial, his lawyer played that song in the courtroom. And here is what Bardo did. Oh my gosh, this is so creepy. It was also revealed that when Bardo pulled the trigger, he was carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, the same novel associated with the gunmen who shot John Lennon and Ronald Reagan earlier that decade. Now, Robert John Bardo was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And even before that, California passed the nation's first anti-stalking laws in 1990, also in 1994. As a direct result of Rebecca Schaeffer's murder, Congress passed what they called the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, which bars state DMVs from giving out any personal information, which you remember, that's how he was actually able to figure out her address. So man, what an awful case, and so interesting to see that old video. All right, still to come, if boxes labeled chocolate cake show up at your house or your office, naturally you're gonna open them, right? Who wouldn't? You'd expect to find a chocolate cake. So just imagine the surprise of customs officers in Germany when they open boxes like that, which it's their job, obviously, only to find something very, very different. Hundreds of things, actually. And they had fangs. You'll see the photos, and then you won't be able to sleep very well. Trust me. That's coming up next. Oh my gosh, look at that graphic with the little crime scene tape coming off the airplane wings. I love that. So fancy. When you work at an airport, you can imagine that you get used to seeing all sorts of weird things. And I don't just mean the passengers. There's plenty of weird passengers if you've been on a plane anytime lately. TSA and customs officers, they see a whole other level of weird, from drugs disguised as candy to guns hidden inside raw chickens to all sorts of weird stuff in between. But what happened the other day at the Cologne-Bonn airport in Germany may just take the cake. Somebody shipped boxes and boxes of what purported to be chocolate sponge cake. That's at least what the boxes said. And even though they came from Vietnam, which, by the way, is not exactly known for its cake exports, what tipped the officers off was the smell, which definitely did not smell like chocolate cake or like really any kind of cake. So officers, they popped the boxes open and found this. I gotta look at this. 1,500 baby tarantulas, each in a plastic container. Can you imagine? Not a crumb of cake in sight. Somehow most of the spiders survived their lengthy plane flight, and they are now being cared for by expert handlers, but some didn't, and in Germany, that's a crime in itself, a violation of animal welfare law, so both the sender and the intended recipient of the boxes are now under investigation. And that is your nightmare fuel for tonight. Good luck sleeping. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.